All right, so I think that's about it. I'm going to move in a little bit closer
Oh, okay,
because
sorry.
I don't know if they can see your. All right, so I'm here with my professor Jen Brandt, a doctor. Oh, okay, I'll start that one over. I am here with Dr. Jen Brandt, my professor at the University of Rhode Island. First thing I wanted to talk to you throughout your experience in women's studies. First thing, so you started off not as a women's studies major, or as a women's you got your degree in English
Yes,
first.
my
So
undergrad, yes.
what made you interested in women's studies?
Well, I went to a very small liberal arts school called Drew University, and my advisor as a freshman was an English professor, and the class that I took with her, everyone had to take like a freshman experience course, and mine was Fictions of Female Development. So it was a lit course, but it was primarily on women's literature and sort of coming of age female experience in novels. And that professor, Wendy Colmar, she started the Women's Studies program at Drew University while I was there. So Women's Studies wasn't actually even a major in my school when I was an undergrad.
Really?
Yes. So I worked with her, and I didn't, by the time I left, Women's Studies is now a major, but when I started, it wasn't. But my honors thesis as an undergrad was in English, because that was my major, but it was on the adolescent horror novels of Christopher Pike, who was very popular when I was younger. He wrote at the same time with like R.L. Stein, so all of these sort of like
Really?
Fear Street and stuff like that.
Oh, I think I have heard of him. Yes,
Yeah.
okay.
And so what I looked at is I did sort of a gendered analysis. That wasn't necessarily my intention. It was just sort of, I remember really liking those books when I was younger, and I kind of wanted to look at them from, I was an adult at the age of 18, I felt like, that perspective. And then in doing that, I noticed there was sort of a very gendered binary being portrayed with, frightened females and these like heroic males, in the way that, girls had sex and then they were murdered or turned into monsters. And so I sort of began my studies kind of through that. And even though in my classes I had been interested in that, it wasn't until I sort of did that project that I thought that was something that I really wanted to focus on and
Really?
that I wanted to continue my education in. Yeah.
That's a cool twist on it.
Yeah. And so then I got my master's in popular culture, which is different. Not many people have that.
Yeah, I've never heard of that before, but
yeah.
I've heard of classes, but not a major.
Right. It's one of the only programs that you can get a graduate degree in popular culture. And so, and while I was there, I focused more on literature, but also a gendered perspective. So I did a feminist analysis of the Da Vinci Code, both the film and the novel.
Really?
And yes, and I looked at the way that religion was gendered in the story. I don't know if you're familiar with the Da Vinci Code, but
a little bit, but not really.
yeah, it was very popular at that point, and so I wanted to think about why was this text so popular, and what did it say to us about our feelings about men and women in society, particularly post 9/11, when there was sort of this push to return to more traditional gender roles, and national security and how that played into it. And then from there, I knew, doing the master's work and focusing on that, I wanted to go on and get my PhD in literature with a focus in gender studies. So that's why I have my graduate certificate in gender and women's studies. And so I teach classes in literature and popular culture, and obviously in women's studies because you're in my class.
Yeah. All right. Now, throughout your studies, who do you think has been the most inspirational to you as far as feminists throughout history? Like not
just my personal, but like things I've read or people I've come in contact with.
Both. What were some of the most influential feminists you've discovered?
Okay. Well, like I mentioned, my advisor as an undergrad, Wendy Colmar, she actually, in starting that program and doing her research, she kind of wrote the feminist theory textbook that we use here at the University of Rhode Island and we use all over. Yeah, and so she's someone that I admire, in part because she instilled in me, in college at a pivotal time in my life, this sort of love of learning and this belief that I could go on and be a professor. I didn't go to school with that intention. I didn't even consider it as a possibility until I was in her office one day and she said, "So what are you going to do?" And I was like, "I don't know." And she said, "You're really good at this. You should think about, going on." And so I did. I followed directions well. So she's been really important. I think that the people that I mean, in terms of media studies, Jean Kilbourne, Naomi Wolf, women that we talk about in class, and then we look at, Rebecca Walker. Those are sort of big, famous names.
Yeah.
But I think the people that have inspired me more are the women and men that I've known who sort of just live every day by, feminist ideals. So Professor Colmar, Jodie Lisberger, who's the director of women's studies here at the University of Rhode Island, is a phenomenal scholar, teacher, thinker, and most importantly, a mentor to me, has been fantastic in my experiences here and in every way possible. And then just, family members and friends, and I try to surround myself with people who kind of live with those ideals of equality and social justice, and trying to treat others as you'd want to be treated. No, I don't think feminism is this radical concept, I guess, is what I'm trying to say.
I would agree, but that's... Oh, I have to stay impartial. I'm sorry.
Okay.
But so a lot of people, a lot of my friends too, have seen like that I'm in a women's studies class. They're like, "Why are you in here? Why would you waste your time with this?" There's a lot of things that people don't really know about feminism, and what do you think? What do you think are the most important things that people need to know about feminism?
I think the first thing is that feminism is for everyone, whether you're rich or poor, man or woman. That feminism is about social equality, right? In both political, economic, and personal freedoms and equality for both men and women, and that it's a movement, meaning that it's changing and that it's evolving. So that's one thing. The static idea of this is what feminism was in 1960, or this is what feminism was even farther back in 1920 when women got the right to vote. That's not the feminism today. That's part of it. It sort of gets rolled up. It's like a snowball. It starts small, and then you just keep adding and adding and adding and adding, in a good way. And so I think that and that feminism is not trying to make women better than men. It's not trying to put men down, but rather that just sort of to value people, both men and women, for who they are, as opposed to seeing the world in binaries, whether they be binaries of sexuality or race or gender, but rather looking at us as individuals, that we all have the potential for growth and development and equal opportunities. So I think that's the most important thing. And so in that sense, men can take women's studies classes and learn and grow from them. And it goes across age ranges and ethnicities and religions, that really there's something in it for everybody.
Yeah. All right. Now, throughout my research for this, I've found a lot of myths about feminism.
Mm-hmm.
And my favorite of which was on Conservapedia, which said that equal opportunities for men and women in the military is a conspiracy to weaken our military. Now, I'm not going to waste your time with that argument, but how do we combat these myths that keep popping up about feminism?
Well, the first thing I always like to do is to ask, when people sort of say, not someone like you said, like, I've read this somewhere, but when people kind of, I know this to be true, that, or that it's doing that, say, well, where did you get this information from? Or like when people tell me all feminists hate men or want this, I say, well, who told you that? Because I'm a feminist and I don't believe that, or, or I don't do that. So sort of challenging people, not in a combative way, but in a way to actually get them to think, well, who's promoting these ideas? What's at stake for them to have us believe that? Why might they want you to believe that feminism is weakening our military? Is it there? That the sort of things that sort of to get people to sort of really question why they think that, or why they believe that, or who who's privileged in sort of in a belief like that, or in a system like that, and who gets sort of left out. And so that's usually how I sort of combat these myths, first by just sort of trying to engage someone in a conversation. I mean, we all can believe different things, but I always tell you all in classes, you need to know why you believe what you believe, and be able to back that up with some sort of evidence. As I would say, well, where's the evidence of that? We've put more money into our military than most countries. We have a larger military than most countries. I can't see how adding people to that weakens it. So just sort of kind of pulling apart these arguments is usually the first step in trying to get people to see things differently, and also to sort of not respond with anger. When most of the time people are asking out of ignorance, and I always say to you that ignorance isn't stupidity, it's just not knowing something. And so, giving people another side of the story, another way to look at things, enables you to get a complete picture to make more informed choices and decisions.
Great. All right. That was a good way. That's a better way to look at ignorance than I certainly do. Now, many people are ignorant of the battles feminists are fighting today. And what do you believe are the largest problems feminists and women face today?
Well, there's two ways to think about this. One is we have to think about the feminism is taking place here in the United States, right? That we want this equality, but the challenges for women here in the U.S. are not the same as women in other countries, where, for example, Saudi Arabia, women are trying to fight for the right to drive cars, or an area of Afghanistan where girls fear going to school because they are subjected to acid attacks, that people are literally throwing acid on them on their way to school only because they're trying to get an education and help themselves. So in no way am I trying to say that there's one uniform thing that women are fighting for. So I think here in the United States the focus is on, one, helping and understanding the situation of women in other parts of the world, and trying to be a help to them without kind of coming in and sort of saying this is the right way, this is what you must do, but rather offering support and kind of guidance as best we can, while also being respective of their cultural conditions and concerns and the limitations placed on them by their governments. And then for here in the United States, I think right now, one of the most, the fact that women still make on average 77% of what men make, so the wage gap. Tomorrow is Pay Equity Day, April 17th. So just a little fun fact for you.
That would be Tuesday in this video, yes, when you guys are seeing this.
Okay, and then also, right now what's going on in terms of women's health and reproductive rights, I think is very troubling to me. I really don't believe that a lot of people believe the things they're saying. I think that it's getting caught up in terms of politics and campaigning, so I'm talking a lot about right-wing conservatives here, and the fact that, saying that insurance companies shouldn't fund birth control, but it's okay to fund Viagra and things like that. I mean, I think when it comes down to it, sadly, people don't believe those arguments, but they're using women and sort of waging a war on women's bodies as part of a larger political agenda, and I find that very troublesome and problematic.
Using them as like pawns in their
in a larger
political game.
Exactly, right. And then the fact that there aren't enough women representatives. Only 17% of Congress, U.S. Congress, are women. So we're just, the fact that these numbers are not equal in terms of representation shows that there are real consequences to those decisions.
Right. This is a question merely out of my, what's the word? Not need, want for knowledge. Did that go down? Because I thought I remember hearing that women were going, or that we were getting more and more women in Congress, and then I heard that it spiked.
Yes.
Did it go back down?
Yes, it did go back down. Yeah.
Okay.
And past the recent election, in the most recent elections. Yes.
Okay. I was just curious about that. Now, the one big thing I was looking at recently, I made this connection when doing the research, is when you're looking at the Occupy protests over the last year, you actually see a lot of parallels. Just one example is parallel to second wave feminism, in that it's a very wide range of causes and it's not really a focused thing. Now, what do you think? What influence do you think the feminist movement has had on protests we see today?
Oh, that's a great question. I think that. So I teach a course called Feminist Thought into Action right now, and we're looking at both the historical movements of feminism, so starting with the first wave of women getting the right to vote, and sort of moving throughout to more current ones. And I would say that the influence has been to think about the ways in which, when you band together in a unified group, right? So when voices, so when women began in the second wave to speak about battered women's movement, the way they were being treated by medical staff, sexual harassment, these things that we've been talking about in class. When more and more people get together and say, hey, my experience isn't just unique to me, but you're going through this too, right? I think that when people get together and they focus on their commonalities as opposed to the things that separate them, whether it be race or sexuality or gender, right? We have a better chance to make positive change. And so in that way, I think feminism has been important because we've seen some of these changes that have taken place. And I think a lot of two things. I think one is that we haven't had a lot of protest movements until the Occupy, which is why we might have seen some backpedaling, perhaps, on some of these sort of feminist gains. Yes. It encourages me when I see movements like Occupy and people kind of banding together, and also the way even that movement sort of runs on feminist principles of inclusion and equality and trying to break down hierarchies and things like that.
Yeah.
The other thing that's really interesting is the way that social media has been very, very effective as a new sort of platform for protest. protest. And so whether it be in the Arab Spring, the use of Facebook and Twitter, and sort of providing a space for, particularly in other countries where women don't have that same access to public space as they do here in the United States, meaning that they can't go out without male escorts, for example, or without, fearing harassment and violence against them. I think that the internet is a tool, so it can be good or bad.
Yeah.
And there are many people who use the internet for bad. But I'm saying things like Facebook, Twitter, blogs can be a way for women especially to have a safe space in the sense that their voices can be heard, but that they're sort of protected by the environment of virtual reality that is the internet and things like that. So I think that that's a very interesting way that I think we'll see more activism going forward, and more of feminism's relationship to that.
Yeah, so it blending into newer technology.
Yes, exactly.
Great. One question here, more just in your opinion. In your opinion, what is the? I feel like you may have just answered this, but what is the future of feminism?
I hope the future of feminism is. Well, two things. One is,
do you want me to set a time scale here?
No, I think that two things that I would like to see is one is feminism is more mainstream, is not being seen as something that is radical, but it's something that is just sort of a way you live your life in terms of justice and social justice and equality, and wanting positive change. So that's one thing. Is sort of I wish the media would kind of not label feminism as something as radical or as disruptive, but rather as a positive alternative. And I also would like to see, as a part of that, in some ways I think that the way that women treat other women is more of a detriment than the way that men treat women in terms of sexism. And so women sort of being, and I'm talking about girls your age in college and in high school, being kinder to each other as a that would be my sort of hope, is that this kind of stopping with cattiness and bullying and things like that. And there seems to be a push right now to bring more awareness to bullying based on sexuality and other factors, which is very important, and I think that's good, but I'm hoping that it filters down into other areas as well.
My mom is a I can't talk, is a substitute teacher's aide at my high school, Chero. And she's noticed this year that the majority of fights that she's had to break up are not between boys, but between girls. Like one girl just walks up to another. She said at one point one girl just walked up to another, punched her in the face because she said something about her on Facebook.
And that's why I mean that the internet can be a bad tool too.
Yes, that's.
Yeah.
I mean that is where it can. I can't talk. That is where it can be very hurtful. Yeah. I have this is just my last question here. This one's a bit more I guess philosophical.
Okay.
Now, will we as a people ever achieve parity?
I think that that is a philosophical question. Like, can a utopia be created? And I've thought about this in other contexts and other ways. And I think the answer to this is no, but not in the sense that it shouldn't be something they have. But the idea is things are always changing. So what works for one generation of people isn't necessarily going to be the same thing that works for the next generation. What we want to be working towards, I think, is this idea of a movement, so that there's always improvement. I think that any time for anything, whether it be issues of equality or whatever, when you think your work is done, that's when that's when you sort of slip into trouble. So I think it's something that we should always be consciously mindful of, is being kind towards others, working toward not only thinking about ourselves, but how it affects other people. And that can go with environmentalism, that can go, with larger issues like you said, the military and war, and global conflicts, and even systems of like capitalism and how we look at the economy and that sort of thing. We have the 99% versus. So I think that we need to be thinking in all ways. Is not so much that we have an end goal in sight, but as much as that if we're constantly working to better ourselves as individuals in a society, that we can achieve some measure of change.
All right. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
You have
this was fun.
You've been very insightful. Thank you so much, and I hope you guys enjoyed it too.